Daughter Monique kicked me out of my own home. She called me a useless old man and said my place was in the trash. What she didn't know is that I own the company her husband works for. In fact, I own him. I made one phone call, and when they showed up to a surprise board meeting on Monday, their world ended. Before you hear the rest of this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you believe that families should respect their elders, because this is a lesson they will never forget. The kitchen smelled like stale morning coffee. I, Nathaniel Nate Price, 71 years old, had just returned from my daily walk around the neighborhood. It's an old habit from my days with the Postal Service, a discipline that keeps a man sharp. My late wife Cynthia always said that habits are the guardrails of life, but no habit, no discipline could have prepared me for this. The note was on the kitchen table right next to the sugar bowl. It wasn't a formal letter. It was a single sheet torn from an expensive cream-colored legal pad, the kind my daughter Monique started carrying around ever since she got married. It was her handwriting, the same delicate cursive I held her hand and taught her to form at this very table all those years ago. Dad. One word, simple. But everything that followed was a betrayal, each word a slow twist of the knife. Greg and I can't take this anymore. Take what I thought to myself. Take what I live alone. I cook my own meals. I clean my own house. I host them for Sunday dinner every single week, even when they spend the entire time staring at their phones, their faces lit up by those little screens. I take their condescension. I take their pity. Who exactly is taking what here? You are too stubborn. Ah, stubborn. Yes, that's what they call it. Stubborn because I refused to sign the stack of papers Greg Reed, my esteemed son-in-law, shoved in my face last week. He called it estate planning. I called it what it was, a hostile takeover of my life. He wanted full power of attorney, both medical and financial. It's just a formality, Nate. He'd said, his voice slick with the false confidence of a 40-year-old white VP who thinks he knows everything. I told him no. That was my stubbornness. I read the next line. My eyes scanned it, but my brain refused to process it. The house is sold. I had to read it 3 times. Sold. How could they sell it? The deed is in my name, mine and Cynthia's. After she passed 10 years ago, it became mine alone. Every nail, every floorboard. The new owners will arrive in 48 hours. Your things will be moved to a storage unit. Storage. They were putting 40 years of my life, of our life, into a cold, dark metal box. And then the final sentence. The one written in red ink, underlined twice just to make sure the venom hit its mark. We found you a room at Sunset Vista Nursing Home. Your place is in the trash. Trash. I didn't feel heat. I didn't yell. I didn't tremble. I felt cold. A deep Arctic cold that started in my chest and spread to my fingertips. It was the cold of absolute, bottomless betrayal. My only child, Monique, the baby girl I held in my arms on the day she was born, the child I walked down the aisle, had just told me my place was in the trash. I looked around my kitchen. This kitchen. This is where Cynthia and I danced our first dance the day we got the keys 40 years ago, laughing as we spun on the bare floor. This linoleum floor, worn and cracked, is where Monique took her first steps, her little hands grabbing my trousers for balance. This old oak table is where I patiently helped her with her algebra homework night after night until she finally understood the equations. Every memory, every laugh, every tear, sold. How the signature, Greg. It had to be Greg. He works at that big tech firm, Pinnacle Logistics. He always thought he was the smartest man in the room. He always looked at me like I was a relic, an old retired mailman, a simpleton. Enjoy the retirement, Nate, he said to me last month at Sunday dinner, patting me on the back with a little too much force. Try not to overdo it. He had no idea that the company where he struts around as a senior vice president. No, not yet. Focus. 48 hours. They gave me 48 hours. They thought I would panic. They thought I would call them weeping, begging. They thought I was a 71-year-old, useless old man, just like the note said. They don't know me. They never did. Not even my own daughter. I walked to the front porch, the note crumpled in my fist. And there it was, the second slap in the face. A bright red sold sign planted with arrogant pride right in the middle of the lawn I'd mowed myself just 2 days ago. It wasn't a generic sign. It was from a high-end luxury realtor I'd never heard of, Reed and Associates. Reed, Greg's last name, of course. He wasn't just hiding his crime, he was branding it. He was proud of it. Mrs. Henderson, my 80-year-old neighbor from across the street, was getting her mail. She saw me. She saw the sign. Her face crumpled in confusion. "Oh, Nate," she called out, walking slowly across the street, her housecoat flapping. I didn't know you were moving. Why so sudden? Are you all right, dear?" What could I tell her that my daughter had just evicted me, that I was being thrown away like yesterday's garbage? I forced a nod, my throat tight. "Yes, ma'am. It's just time. Time for a change of scenery." "But this house," she said, her voice thick with nostalgia. "This house is a neighborhood landmark. You and Cynthia, you built this place." "Yes, ma'am," I said, the word landmark echoing in my head. "We did." "This house is in the old 4th Ward of Atlanta. When Cynthia and I bought it with every penny we had, this was the heart of the black community. We saw this neighborhood through everything. We saw kids we knew grow up and move away, and then we saw the new folks move in. White families building sharp modern box houses that towered over our old brick homes. They call it gentrification. I call it an invasion. Greg called it a gold mine. "You're sitting on a gold mine, Nate," he'd said, his mouth full of the brisket I had smoked for 12 hours. "This was at our last Sunday dinner. This dump of yours is worth at least $3 million in land value alone." I'd corrected him then. "It's not a dump, Greg. It's my home. It was Cynthia's home." He laughed, that dismissive, sharp laugh that I'd come to despise. "Whatever you say, old man. Just keep holding on to your precious bricks." Now I understood. He wasn't suggesting, he was prospecting, and my daughter, my Monique, had let him. She had co-signed the betrayal. I turned and went back inside past the kitchen into the living room. I sat down in Cynthia's armchair. The fabric was worn, faded, but I kept it. I could still smell her scent on it if I tried. Lavender and clean cotton. "Promise me, Nate," she whispered to me that last night in the hospital, her hand frail in mine. "You'll look after her. Monique she's impressionable. Don't let this world harden her. Protect her." "I failed you, Cynthia. I failed you completely." Monique changed. The shift began 5 years ago, the day she met Gregory Reed at some glittering corporate charity event. I never understood why Monique was even there. She was working part-time in a small art gallery. Greg was the main event, a rising star, senior VP at Pinnacle Logistics. White blonde hair, a $1 million smile, and the dead eyes of a shark. He dazzled my daughter. He showed her a world I never did, because I had deliberately kept that world hidden. A world of 5-star restaurants, gleaming sports cars, and weekend trips to islands where you don't ask the price. Monique, my girl, who used to be thrilled when I brought home a rare book I'd found, suddenly only talked about Hermes bags and private clubs. "Dad, I'm embarrassed," she confessed to me one night after Greg's first visit to this house. My heart stopped. "Embarrassed? Of what, baby?" "Of this." She waved her hand around the room. "This house, the old furniture, this neighborhood, you, your job. Greg is used to better." What did I say then, I remember? I said, if a man judges you based on what your father has instead of who you are, he's not the man you should be with. She burst into tears. "You don't understand. You never understand." She was right. I didn't understand. I didn't understand how someone could sever their roots so quickly, so cleanly. Their wedding was a spectacle, a $100,000 affair. I stood there in a rented tuxedo, feeling like an imposter. Greg paid for it, a generous gesture he made sure every guest knew about. "Don't worry about a thing, Nate," he announced loudly to his circle of slick, wealthy friends. "I got this. Father-in-law's covered." His friends looked at me with that awful, polite pity. The poor old mailman father-in-law. I let them believe it. I let them all believe I was poor. Why, because of Cynthia. "I love this life, Nate," she told me years and years ago. It was right after Pinnacle Logistics, my company, had signed its first major contract with Amazon. "I love our house. I love our neighborhood. Don't ever let that money change us. Promise me, we will always just be us." And I promised. I let a trusted CEO run the company. I kept my 55% controlling interest and became the silent founder on the board. I officially took my retirement from the Postal Service, a job I really had worked for 10 years before Pinnacle took off, and I lived on that pension. The millions in quarterly dividends. They went straight into a blind trust. the Cynthia Price Trust. Greg didn't know. He, a senior VP, had no idea that the old mailman he despised was in fact his ultimate boss. He had no idea he was working for me. And now he had sold my house from under me. He had forged my name. He had signed the papers to have me committed. He had called me trash. He crossed the line. He made me break my promise to Cynthia. The cold in my chest was gone. It was replaced by something else. A hot, clean, clarifying anger. They said my place was in the trash. Fine. I'll show them. I'll show them exactly what happens when you try to throw away the man who owns the entire landfill. My first instinct was not to call Monique. It was not to dial her number and scream into the phone. It was not to beg. Begging is precisely what they expected. Panic is what they wanted. They were counting on the useless old man to fall apart to prove their own narrative right. They wanted me to call them weeping so Greg could turn to Monique and say, "See, he's hysterical, he's incompetent, we're doing the right thing." No, I would not grant them the satisfaction. My second instinct was not to pack. The note said my things would be moved to storage. My things. I looked around the living room. Cynthia's armchair, the one with the worn velvet arms. The tall mahogany bookshelf I built with my own 2 hands, the one holding the history books I used to read to Monique. The heavy oak desk in the corner. That desk is where I sat right here in this house and signed the incorporation papers for Pinnacle Logistics while she slept in her crib upstairs. These are not things. This is my life. This is our life. And I would not pack a single damn box. I would not lift one finger to help them erase me. I walked back to the kitchen, my hand steady. The cold anger had settled into a kind of calm, a surgical precision. I opened the junk drawer by the stove, the one that always sticks. I rummaged past old rubber bands and stray batteries and found what I was looking for. A thick, black permanent marker. I uncapped it. The sharp chemical smell of the ink filled the kitchen. It smelled like finality. I smoothed out the cruel, hurried note from Monique. I turned it over. The cream-colored back was blank, clean, an empty slate. My hand did not shake. I pressed the fat chisel tip to the paper and wrote 2 words, just 2, in big, bold, angry block letters. Check Monday. I walked to the front door. I looked through the peephole. The red "Sold" sign was still there, mocking me from the lawn. I found the roll of packing tape they must have left behind, probably expecting me to use it to seal up my own life. I ripped off a long, loud strip. I centered the note, my 2 words facing inward, and taped it firmly to the inside of the door. I wanted it to be the first thing they saw when they came back. And they would be back. Why Monday? Because Monday at 10 a.m. sharp is when the quarterly audit at Pinnacle Logistics begins. Monday is when the accountant's friends of Greg's, no doubt, but professionals nonetheless, will start pulling the threads on his expense reports. Monday is when the $3 million hole he desperately needs to fill the hole he was going to plug by fraudulently selling my house becomes a $5 million crater that will swallow him whole. Greg is a fool, a greedy, arrogant, short-sighted fool. He thinks he's a wolf, but he's just a dog chasing a car. He thinks he can move money around my money from my company, and no one will notice. He thinks he can forge a power of attorney. My mind flashed back, a year ago. Monique at my kitchen table smiling, pushing a thick stack of papers toward me. "Dad, it's just routine papers for my taxes, something for Greg's accountant. Can you just sign here, here, and here?" I remembered my hesitation. It felt like too many pages. But I looked at my daughter, the little girl I'd raised, and I signed. That was my mistake, my trust. My stubbornness was in not signing the new papers last week, the ones that would have declared me incompetent. This note, this eviction, wasn't just cruelty. It was a panic move. It was the sloppy work of a desperate amateur. Greg needs me gone before Monday. He needs me locked away in Sunset Vista. He needs me legally declared incompetent so he can walk into that bank, nullify my refusal, and push the sale of this house through. He needs me silent. They underestimated me. They always have. They see the old mailman. They see the quiet black man in the fading neighborhood tending his garden. They don't see the man who built a logistics empire from a single rusty van because he knew how to see patterns when everyone else just saw chaos. And I see the pattern now. Greg is trapped. Monique is complicit. They've overplayed their hand. I stood there for a long time just looking at the 2 words I'd written. They would be back. Oh yes. Not in 48 hours to check on the old man. They would be back on Monday. When that bank call came informing Greg the loan was denied. when the auditors started asking questions he couldn't answer, when his entire fabricated world started to collapse. They would come storming back here. They would burst through that door in a blind animal panic, looking for me, looking for a way to fix what they had broken. And those two words would be the first thing that greeted them: a puzzle, an appointment, a promise. By the time they figured out what it meant, it would be far too late. The trap would already be sprung. I didn't call Monique. I didn't call the police. I didn't call the fake realtor. I walked to the old rotary phone in the hallway, the heavy black one that Cynthia always loved because the ring sounded, as she said, like a real telephone. I picked up the receiver and dialed a number I knew by heart, a number I hadn't called in 5 years. It rang once, twice. On the third ring, a deep, familiar voice answered, not with hello, but with a simple questioning, Nate, Otis, it's me. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Otis King and I had been friends for 50 years. We grew up together in this neighborhood, we played ball in the same dusty lots, and we went to Morehouse together. He became a lawyer, one of the sharpest in Atlanta. I built an empire. He was the only person on earth besides Cynthia who knew the truth. He was the architect of the wall I had built around my life. Nate, he said again, his voice heavy, professional, and full of a terrible understanding. You know what this call means. Are you absolutely sure? I looked at the note still crumpled in my other hand. I looked at the sold sign on my lawn. I looked at Cynthia's armchair. Are you sure? He pressed his lawyer's mind, already running through the catastrophic implications. Once this bell is rung, Nate, you can't unring it. Your life, the one you've lived for the last 20 years, it's over. They sold Cynthia's house, Otis, I said, my voice quiet, devoid of all emotion. The line went dead silent. Otis had loved Cynthia too. He was the best man at our wedding. He understood what those words meant. It wasn't about the property. It wasn't about the $3 million in land value. It was about her. It was about the promise. They sold her house, I repeated, and they left me a note. They said my place is in the trash. I heard Otis inhale sharply, a sound of controlled rage. Who, Greg, that arrogant fool? And Monique, I said. The name tasted like ash in my mouth. Otis didn't say, I told you so, though he had every right to. He had warned me about Greg. He had warned me about Monique's spending habits. He had warned me that my quiet, simple life was a beautiful dream that couldn't last forever in a world full of wolves. What do you need me to do, Nate? He asked. His voice was all business now. I need you to do it all, I said. The full protocol. No, I said, thinking. Not the full protocol. That's for when I'm gone. I paused, then said the words I never thought I would say. Otis, activate the Cynthia protocol. This was a new silence, a different kind. A heavy, profound stillness. The Cynthia protocol was not part of our original plan. It was something I had asked Otis to draft up about 3 years ago after Greg and Monique's wedding. It was a contingency plan, a last resort. It was designed to protect the company from my own family. I had hoped, I had prayed I would never have to use it. It was a measure so precise, so devastating, it would dismantle their entire lives without me ever having to raise my voice. Otis finally spoke. Nate, the Cynthia protocol is not a warning shot. It's a kill shot. It's scorched earth. It will expose everything. The accounts, the trust, the shares. It will expose you. Are you ready for that? They called me a useless old man, Otis. They said my place was in the trash. They put a sold sign on Cynthia's lawn. I am not asking you if I am ready. I am telling you to execute. Understood, Otis said. His voice was grim. Phase 1. I'll freeze the Reed discretionary account immediately. I almost laughed. Greg and Monique didn't even know that account existed. It was a sub-account of the main trust one I had set up to anonymously pay off their escalating credit card debts, their car loans, the down payment on their condo. They just thought they were good with money. They were about to find out they were simply well-funded. Phase 2, Otis continued. I will notify the bank that all power of attorney documents, past, present, and future associated with your name are under investigation for fraud. The forged POA Greg used to sell the house will be void before the ink is dry on his new loan application. Good, I said. That will stop the sale cold. It will do more than that, Nate. It will trigger a criminal investigation. When that forged document hits the bank's legal department, it's over for him. Good, I said again. And phase 3, The pinnacle board. This is the big one, Nate. This is the one you can't take back. I know what it is, I said. The protocol requires me to call an emergency meeting of the board of directors, Otis said, as if reading from the document itself. It requires me to inform them that the silent founder is invoking his majority shareholder rights and will be attending in person to address gross malfeasance at the executive level. When is the quarterly audit, Otis? I asked, though I already knew. Monday, 10 a.m., he replied. Then the emergency meeting will be Monday, 10 a.m., in the main boardroom. Nate, Otis said one last time, this will destroy them. Your daughter, Greg, their reputation, their lives. There is no coming back from this. I looked at the note in my hand. Your place is in the trash. I know, I said. That's the point. Activate the Cynthia protocol, Otis, and have a car waiting for me. I'm leaving the house. Where are you going? The Four Seasons. The presidential suite. I think after 40 years it's time I started living like the man they think I'm not. It's done, Nate, Otis said. The bell is rung. I'll see you on Monday, Mr. Chairman. He hung up. I placed the heavy receiver back on the cradle. The old phone gave a quiet final click. It was done. I walked out of the kitchen past Cynthia's armchair and headed for the front door, leaving the note with my 2 words taped to the inside. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't take a single thing, except for the small, worn photo of Cynthia I always kept in my wallet. I stepped out onto the porch and closed the door behind me. I didn't lock it. It wasn't my house anymore. It was evidence. I stood up from the kitchen table. The call with Otis was finished. The protocol was active. The pieces were in motion. I didn't go to the bedroom. I didn't open my closet. I didn't reach for a suitcase or a duffel bag. They were expecting me to pack up my broken life to haul my useless belongings to their designated storage unit. They were expecting me to be the man they saw, the man who saves old string and empty jars. I would not be that man. I walked to the small table by the front door. My wallet was there. An old brown leather bifold, soft and worn at the edges, cracked like a riverbed. It was the last gift Cynthia ever gave me. I picked it up and put it in my back pocket. Beside where the wallet lay was a small silver-plated frame. It held my favorite picture of her. It was from a picnic at Piedmont Park maybe 20 years ago. The sun was in her eyes, making her squint, and she was in the middle of a laugh, her head thrown back. She was beautiful. My fingers, steady and sure, opened the simple latch on the back of the frame. I slid the photograph out. The cardboard backing felt warm. I didn't look at the empty frame. I gently placed the photograph in the inside breast pocket of my jacket, right over my heart. A wallet and a picture. That was all I would take. 40 years of life, and in the end it came down to this. Everything else in this house was just furniture. They could have it. They could fight over the ashes. I walked to the front door. I saw the note I had taped to the inside, my own black angry letters staring back at me. Check, Monday. A grim appointment. I put my hand on the doorknob. I opened the door, the familiar creak of the old hinges, a sound that had been the soundtrack to my life. Monique running out to school me, coming home from my route, Cynthia greeting me with a kiss. It sounded different now. It sounded final. I stepped out onto the porch. The humid Atlanta air hit my face. I could smell my neighbor's azaleas blooming. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. The bright, garish, blood-red "Sold" sign. It was a stake driven through the heart of my lawn, a monument to their greed. I made a conscious choice. I did not turn my head. I did not give it the satisfaction of my gaze. To look at it was to acknowledge their power, to validate their betrayal. I would not. I stared straight ahead at the cracked sidewalk that led to the street. I pulled the front door shut behind me. I didn't hear it latch. I didn't check if it was locked. It wasn't my house anymore. It was a crime scene. It was a trap. It was their problem now. I walked down the 3 porch steps, my hand brushing the old wooden railing Cynthia always said we needed to repaint. I walked down the concrete path. I walked right past the red sign. I did not look back. I was not just leaving a building of brick and wood. I was leaving the past. I was leaving the ghost of Nate the mailman. I was leaving the grieving widower, the simple, quiet father. The man they thought they knew, the man they thought they could throw away, was gone. The man walking onto the street, the man who turned right toward the main road to catch a cab, was someone else entirely. He was Nathaniel Price, chairman of the board. And he was going to war. I stood on the curb of the street I had lived on for 40 years. My feet were planted on the cracked sidewalk where I had taught Monique to ride her bike. I did not feel nostalgic. I felt free. I raised my hand not with the weakness of a 71-year-old man but with the sharp authority of someone hailing a ride. A yellow cab, old and smelling faintly of stale cigarettes, pulled over. This was perfect. They expected me to be helpless. They expected me to be trapped. They probably thought I would be sitting on the porch weeping until the new owners arrived. They never imagined I would just leave. The driver, a young man with headphones, barely looked at me. "Where to, Pops?" "Pops." I almost smiled. That's what they all saw. Just an old man. "Downtown," I said, my voice clear. "The Four Seasons Hotel." The driver looked at me in the rearview mirror. I saw his eyes flick over my simple windbreaker, my old man trousers, my worn shoes. He saw the retired mailman. He didn't see the man who owned the building his cab company probably leased its garage from. "The Four Seasons, you sure, Pops, that's a rich folks' place." "I am aware," I said, my voice flat. "Just drive." He shrugged and pulled into traffic. I watched my neighborhood disappear through the dirty window. I saw the corner store where I bought Monique ice cream. I saw the park where I pushed her on the swings. I saw the brick facade of my home, my former home, get smaller and smaller until it was just another house on another street. My daughter, my Monique. She thought she was throwing me in the trash. She thought she was sentencing me to an old folks' home. She thought she was winning. What she never understood, what I had carefully hidden from her, was that I built the world she was trying to impress. Greg, her shark-eyed husband, was so proud of his VP title at Pinnacle Logistics. He was so proud of his 6-figure salary and his company car and his stock options. He had no idea he was a glorified employee. He had no idea that I, Nate the mailman, held the controlling shares. He had no idea that his entire career, his entire sense of superiority was a gift that I had allowed him to have. And now he had used that gift to try and destroy me. The cab rattled over the cobblestones of the hotel driveway. The Four Seasons rose up in front of us, a gleaming tower of glass and steel. It was a different world, a world of quiet, effortless wealth. The driver pulled up behind a black Bentley. He looked nervous. "That'll be $28.50, Pops." I pulled out my old leather wallet, the one Cynthia gave me. I didn't pull out a fancy credit card. I pulled out 2 $20 bills. "Keep the change, son," I said. I stepped out of the cab, and the world shifted. The moment my worn shoe hit the pavement, a man in a sharp gray topcoat and white gloves stepped forward. He wasn't the driver. He was the doorman. He was older, distinguished with silver at his temples. He didn't look at my old jacket. He didn't look at my tired face. He looked me straight in the eye, and his professional demeanor vanished, replaced by a look of profound, genuine respect. He bowed his head, slightly, not in servitude but in recognition. "Good evening, Mr. Price," he said. His voice was deep and respectful. "We have been expecting you." I saw the cab driver's face in his mirror. His jaw was on the floor. He was staring at the doorman, then at me, then back at the doorman, his brain trying to compute how Pops in the worn windbreaker was being greeted by name at the most expensive hotel in Atlanta. "Thank you, Thomas," I said, nodding to the doorman. "It's good to be back." "It has been too long, sir," Thomas replied. He opened the massive glass door, holding it for me. "Mrs. Evans is waiting for you at the private reception desk." I walked into the lobby. It was silent. The floors were polished marble that reflected the soft golden light from the chandeliers. A massive arrangement of fresh lilies and orchids sat in the center of the room, their fragrance filling the air. There was no line. There was no noise, just the faint sound of a classical piano playing somewhere in the distance. People here didn't talk about money. They didn't need to. Greg and Monique, with their loud talk of $3 million, and their flashy leased BMW, would have looked like children in this room. They were new money, desperate to prove they belonged. They didn't understand that the people in this building, the real money, preferred silence. I walked past the main reception. A woman in a black tailored suit stepped out from a discreet office. She was Mrs. Evans, the hotel manager. "Mr. Price," she said, her smile warm and immediate. "Welcome home. We have the presidential suite prepared for you just as you always prefer. Will you be needing anything tonight? A late dinner, perhaps?" Monique thought I was on my way to Sunset Vista. A shared room, a cot, a linoleum floor that smelled of bleach. She thought I was going to the trash. "No thank you, Evelyn," I said. "Just coffee, black, and the secure line to my office." She handed me a simple, heavy key card. No check-in, no credit card required. My name was already on the account. It had been for 20 years. "Of course, sir. The suite is ready. Your instructions for the Cynthia protocol have been received. The secure line is active." I took the private elevator, the one that bypasses the main guest floors. The car was lined with dark wood and velvet, ascending silently, smoothly. My reflection looked back at me in the mirrored wall. I still looked like the retired mailman, the old clothes, the tired eyes. But the man in the reflection wasn't broken. He wasn't helpless. The elevator doors opened directly into the suite, the presidential suite. It was vast. The ceiling was 30 feet high. An entire wall was glass, a panoramic, breathtaking view of the Atlanta skyline, a sea of lights twinkling below. A grand piano sat in one corner. A massive white sofa was arranged in the center of the room. A fireplace currently dark was built into a marble wall. This wasn't a hotel room. This was a penthouse. This was my other home. The one Monique and Greg never knew existed. I walked across the plush silent carpet to the window. I looked down on the city. My city. Pinnacle Logistics headquarters was down there, that tall black tower to the left. Greg was probably asleep in his condo right now, dreaming of the $3 million he thought he had stolen. Monique was probably dreaming of how she would spend it. They thought they were players. They thought they were smart. They thought they were throwing me away. I took the small, faded photograph of Cynthia from my jacket pocket. I looked at her laughing face, squinting in the sun. "I tried, Cynthia," I whispered to the glass. "I tried to keep the promise. I tried to live the simple life you loved. I tried to protect her." I felt a familiar sting behind my eyes, but it wasn't sadness. It was that cold, clean anger again. "But they sold your house," I said. "They put a price on our life. They put a price on you." A quiet knock came from the service entrance. A young man in a bow tie rolled in a silver cart. He placed a pot of steaming dark coffee, a single cup, and a secure encrypted satellite phone on the glass desk. He bowed and left without a word. I sat down. I poured the coffee. It was Jamaican Blue Mountain, my favorite. The kind I hadn't had in years because Cynthia always said it was too extravagant. I picked up the secure phone. I looked at the city lights. I looked at Cynthia's picture. The audience, the people watching my life, they just saw the first twist. They just realized the useless old man wasn't poor. They thought this was the end of the story. They thought I would just live here in luxury while my daughter imploded. They were wrong. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning. This wasn't about the money. It was about justice. It was about the promise. I picked up the phone. I knew exactly who to call. "Otis," I said when he answered. "It's done. I'm in. Now I want you to tell me everything the private investigator found. Tell me about the fraud. Tell me about the forged signature. Tell me exactly how my daughter and her husband planned to put me in the trash. I want every single dirty detail. Because on Monday, I'm not just taking back my house, I'm taking back my company." I was on my second cup of coffee when the knock came. It wasn't the timid tap of hotel staff. It was firm, precise, and patient. 2 raps. The signal we had agreed on. I opened the heavy door. Otis King stood in the hallway looking like he always did. While I had spent 20 years perfecting the art of looking invisible, Otis had spent 20 years perfecting the art of being seen. He was 72 sharp and wore his power like the perfectly tailored 3-piece charcoal suit that fit his frame. He was one of the most respected and feared corporate lawyers in Atlanta. He was also the only man alive I trusted with my life. He didn't greet me with a hello. He just nodded his eyes, taking in the opulent suite. "Nate," he said, his voice a low rumble. "You always did have a flair for the dramatic, the presidential suite." "It's quiet, Otis," I said, closing the door behind him. "And the view is good. Coffee?" "No," he said. He walked past the grand piano and placed his heavy, worn leather briefcase on the glass-top desk. The click of the brass latches opening echoed in the silent room. "I'm not here for a social call." He didn't look angry. He looked tired. He looked like a man who had seen too much and was about to see more. "The Cynthia protocol is in motion," he said. "Phase 1 is complete. The Reed discretionary account is frozen. As of 5 minutes ago, their credit cards are just plastic." "Good," I said, turning to face him. And the house? Phase 2 is filed, Otis said. The bank's legal department gets the fraud alert at 9 a.m. tomorrow. The forged power of attorney is void. The sale is dead. They just don't know it yet. I nodded, feeling a small cold knot of satisfaction. So it's done. Otis looked at me and his expression was grim. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out not just a few papers, but a thick 2-inch binder bound in black. He didn't hand it to me. He dropped it on the desk. The sound was a heavy, dull thud. No, Nate, he said, his voice low. It's not done. It's just beginning. I've been digging ever since you mentioned Greg was acting suspicious last year. I hired a private investigator, a forensic accountant. I was hoping I was wrong. He pushed the binder toward me. It's worse than we thought, Nate. Much, much worse. My blood ran cold again, a feeling I was getting used to. Worse? What's worse than them forging my name and throwing me out of my own home? Otis opened the binder. The first page was a flowchart, a spider's web of shell corporations and offshore accounts. Greg isn't just a greedy son-in-law, Nate. He's a criminal. And he's been using your company, our company, as his personal piggy bank for 18 months. I stared at the paper, my mind refusing to connect the dots. Pinnacle, my company impossible. Alistair, the CEO, he watches the books like a hawk. Alistair watches the front door, Otis said, his voice sharp. Greg has been siphoning millions out the back. He's not just trying to sell your house to get rich, Nate. He's trying to sell your house to cover his tracks. He's trying to plug a $5 million hole in Pinnacle's finances before the audit on Monday. I finally understood. The note, the 48-hour deadline, the panic. My God, I whispered. He was going to use my money, to hide the money he stole from me. Otis turned the page. And that's not the half of it. He didn't do it alone. Open the file, Nate. We need to talk about Monique. Otis tapped the thick black binder. We need to talk about Monique. I looked at the binder, then at my old friend. My mind was still reeling from the flowchart, the shell corporations, the $5 million hole. I was trying to understand how Greg, a man I knew was arrogant but assumed was competent, could be so monumentally stupid. How could he risk his career, his family, everything by stealing from a multi-billion-dollar corporation? Otis saw the question on my face. He answered it before I could ask. He didn't think he was risking anything, Nate. That's the problem. That's your problem. He, like everyone else in your life, only sees Nate the mailman. He was right. The cover story. It had worked too well. It had become my reality, and in doing so, it had become my prison. You have to understand, I never meant for it to go this far. I really was a mailman. For 10 years, right out of high school. It was a good job, an honest job. I wore out 3 pairs of shoes on these Atlanta streets. I knew every dog, every cracked sidewalk, every family. I loved the simplicity of it. A to B. A package delivered. A promise kept. But I had a different kind of mind. While my body walked the routes, my mind saw patterns. I saw chaos. I saw inefficiency. I saw wasted fuel, overlapping routes, trucks driving empty. I saw a system that could be better. So at night, I worked. While Cynthia slept, I sat at that old kitchen table, the one Greg and Monique just tried to steal, and I taught myself to code. I had an old Commodore 64, a thick book on BASIC, and a pot of black coffee. I wasn't building a game. I was building an algorithm. A brutal, efficient piece of logic that could map the fastest route for 1,000 packages at once. I had the code, but I wasn't a salesman. I knew trucks, not boardrooms. I met Alistair, our current CEO, at a diner. He was a shift manager for a small freight company drowning in debt and diesel fumes. I showed him my program on a 5¼ inch floppy disk. He saw the future. I just saw a partner I could trust. We started Pinnacle Logistics in my garage, literally. The garage they thought was just filled with old tools and lawnmowers. Our first fleet was one rusty 1985 Ford Econoline van, the one I used to drive myself. I designed the routes. Alistair got the clients. Then it was 2 vans, then 10, then 50, and then Amazon called. Suddenly, we weren't a local business. We were a global solution. The money that came in wasn't money, it was a flood. It was a number that didn't seem real. Otis remembers. He was my lawyer then, just as he is now. He came to my office back when my office was still in the garage. He had the first official valuation papers. Nate, he said, his hands shaking just a little. Do you know what this says? You're worth 9 figures. You're one of the richest men in Georgia. I looked at the paper, then I looked out the garage window into the kitchen. I could see Cynthia. She was standing at the sink, humming clipping coupons from the Sunday paper. She was wearing her favorite faded yellow apron, 9 figures, and my wife was trying to save 25 cents on a can of tomato soup. That night I tried to tell her. Cynthia, baby, I said, holding those papers. We're rich. I mean, rich enough to buy this whole city. Rich enough to move to Buckhead to buy a jet, anything you want. I expected her to be happy. I expected her to cry, to celebrate. She didn't. She put down her dish towel and looked at me, and her eyes weren't bright. They were terrified. Nate, she said, and her voice was so quiet I had to lean in. I don't want that. I don't want any of that. I've seen what money does to people around here. I've seen it turn good neighbors into strangers. I've seen it turn family into enemies. It makes you forget who you are. It makes you forget where you came from. It makes you ugly inside. She put her hands on my face. Promise me, Nathaniel. Promise me you will never let this money make us into people we despise. I promised her, right there in our kitchen, I would not let it change us. I would not let it change our family. So Otis and I built the wall. I officially retired from Pinnacle. I stepped down from the board. Alistair became the public face, the CEO. I became the silent founder, the chairman emeritus. I kept my 55% controlling interest, my majority shares, but I put all of it, every last stock certificate, into a blind trust, the Cynthia Price Trust, and I went back to being Nate. I told Monique that my little delivery project had been bought out by a bigger company, that I'd made a little money enough to be comfortable. I told her I was taking my old age pension from the Postal Service. I let the story write itself. Old Nate Price. Yeah, he's a retired mailman, lives on his pension, a good simple man. It was easy. It was quiet. It was what Cynthia wanted. And then she got sick. All that money, all those millions sitting in the trust, all the power in the world. And it couldn't stop the cancer. It couldn't buy me one more minute with her. It couldn't do a damn thing. After she was gone, the money felt like a curse. It felt like a cruel joke. So I doubled down. I didn't just live simply, I retreated. I put the Nate the Mailman coat back on and I buttoned it up tight. It was the only thing that felt real. It was the only thing that still felt like us. I focused on Monique. I poured everything I had left into her. I wanted her to be strong, to be independent, to be better than me. I wanted her to value effort, not inheritance. I never told her about the trust. I never told her about the shares. I wanted her to make her own way. Otis looked at me from across the desk, his eyes full of a sad, heavy wisdom. You kept your promise, Nate. You didn't let the money change you. You honored Cynthia, but you forgot the other half of her warning. I frowned. What warning? That it turns family into enemies, Otis said. You were so busy protecting Monique from the money you never thought you needed to protect yourself from her. You let her see the old mailman, the simple weak father who needed taking care of. You made yourself the perfect target. He was right. My God, he was right. I had protected my daughter from wealth, but I had failed to protect myself from her greed. So, Greg, I said, my voice hoarse. My vice president, he has no idea. Nate, Otis said, shaking his head. Greg doesn't even know your name is on the company letterhead. All board communications come from the office of the founder via my law firm. He thinks the founder is some mysterious white billionaire in Switzerland. He has absolutely no idea that he's been robbing, forging, and conspiring against the man he pats on the back and calls Pops. Otis leaned forward. But that Nate isn't the real problem. Greg is a simple thief. He's desperate and he's sloppy. The real problem is her. He tapped the thick black binder. It wasn't labeled Greg. It wasn't labeled Pinnacle. It was labeled Monique Reed, Surveillance. I stared at the binder on the desk. It was thick black and heavy. It didn't look like a case file. It looked like an anchor, something designed to pull a life to the bottom of the sea. And it had my daughter's name on it, Monique Reed, Surveillance. Otis, wait, I said, my voice hoarse. You said Greg. You said this was Greg. But that binder, that's my daughter's name. Otis let out a long, slow breath. He loosened his tie, the first unprofessional move I'd seen him make in 30 years. Yes, Nate. That's the problem. Greg is the blunt instrument. He's the one swinging the hammer. But Monique, she's the poison. She's the one who's been holding your hands down while he swings. He flipped open the binder. Let's start with the instrument. Let's start with the house. He pulled out the first document. It was a photocopy, a standard power of attorney form. He slid it across the glass desk. This, he said, is the forged POA Greg Reed filed with the county clerk 3 months ago. I picked it up. My hands were steady. I looked at the signature on the bottom line, Nathaniel Price. It was a good forgery. It was my signature, or rather, it was a near-perfect copy of the signature I used to have. My mind flashed back, a year ago, right here in my own kitchen. Monique smiling, her face bright. Dad, it's just some routine papers for our taxes. Greg's accountant needs them to file our joint returns or something. It's just boilerplate stuff. Can you just sign here, here, and here? She had been so happy that day. She'd brought me my favorite sweet potato pie. I looked at Otis. She brought me pie, I whispered. She said it was for her taxes. She lied, Nate. Otis said, his voice hard. She had you sign a stack of 20 documents. 19 of them were blank tax forms. The 20th, the one she slipped into the bottom of the pile, was this: a durable power of attorney giving Gregory Reed complete control over all your assets and property. I closed my eyes. The sweet, cloying taste of that pie, the taste of betrayal, filled my mouth. So he just sold the house? It's worse than that, Otis said, turning the page. He didn't just sell it. He's too arrogant for a simple theft. Greg created a new trust in your name, the Nathaniel Price Senior Living Trust. He named himself the sole trustee. Then he used that fake trust to sell the house from you to himself for $1. $1. $1, Otis confirmed. He bought it. Then with the deed in his shell company's name, he went to a hard money lender and applied for a $3 million loan against the house's actual value. The loan was set to close tomorrow. He gets the cash, the house is leveraged to the hilt, and you legally have nothing. By the time you untangled the legal mess, he and Monique would be long gone. I put the paper down. He didn't just forge my name, Otis. He erased me. He made me a ghost in my own life. But why? I asked, the cold anger returning. Why $3 million? They live well, but that's not just greed, Otis. That's desperation. Otis looked at me, his eyes dark. Because the $3 million is just the patch, Nate. This is the wound. He turned the page again. This time it wasn't a legal document. It was a flow chart, a complex, sickening spider's web of bank routing numbers, shell corporations based in Delaware and the Cayman Islands, and wire transfers. And at the very top of that web, in a box I recognized all too well, was the logo for Pinnacle Logistics, my company. No, I said. The word came out as a growl. He wouldn't. He couldn't. Alistair, the CEO, Alistair watches the books like a hawk. Alistair watches the front door, Otis countered, his voice sharp. Greg has been siphoning millions out the back. He's the senior VP of acquisitions. He's the man Alistair trusts to scout and purchase new warehouses, new distribution centers. It was the perfect position for a thief. Otis's finger traced the path of the money. It's a classic over-invoice scheme, Nate, but on a massive scale. He's been doing it for 18 months. He finds a warehouse in Arizona worth, say, $10 million. He uses a shell company, Reed Holdings LLC, to buy it first. He buys it for 10. The middleman, I breathed, feeling sick. The middleman, Otis confirmed. 1 week later, he, acting as Pinnacle's VP of acquisitions, buys the exact same warehouse from his own shell company for $15 million. He authorizes the payment from Pinnacle's accounts. He pockets the $5 million difference, and Alistair, trusting his star VP, signs off on it. $5 million, I said. My mind was racing. This wasn't just family betrayal. This was a federal crime. This was wire fraud. This was the kind of thing that doesn't just get you fired. It gets you 10 to 20 in a federal prison. He's done it 3 times, Otis continued. No, wait. The private investigator found another one just last month, in Texas. 4 times. He's bled this company for nearly $20 million. $20 million? I was on my feet now. Impossible. Alistair would see that. The board would see that. A $20 million discrepancy. Not if he didn't report the inflated price, Otis said. He's smarter than that, I'll give him that much. He reported the correct purchase price to the board, the $10 million. He covered the extra $5 million he stole each time by bundling it. He faked invoices for logistical upgrades, zoning fees, transportation taxes, union hazard pay. He buried the theft under a mountain of fake paperwork. He's been bleeding the company dry $5 million at a time and telling Alistair it's just the cost of doing business in a new state. I walked to the window staring down at the city lights. I felt the glass cool against my forehead. But an audit, Otis? We run audits. Alistair is ruthless about the audits. And that, Otis said, his voice now quiet, is why we are here. That is why your lawn has a sold sign on it. Greg got sloppy. The last deal, the one in Texas, he got too greedy. He tried to pull $7 million out in one go. The paperwork didn't clear fast enough. He left a hole, a $5 million hole in the quarterly expenditures that he couldn't cover in time. I turned around slowly, the final piece of the puzzle clicking into place. And the quarterly audit is Monday, Otis said. 10 a.m. Sharp. My own words written on the back of Monique's note flashed in my mind. Check Monday. He's in a panic, I said, the realization dawning. He was counting on the $3 million loan from my house sale to hit his account by Friday. He was going to use my money to create more fake invoices to plug the $5 million hole just long enough to pass the audit. He wasn't trying to get rich off my house, Otis. No, Nate, Otis said, shaking his head. He was trying to stay out of prison. And the 48-hour deadline, I whispered. The note. It wasn't just to be cruel, it was his timeline. He needed me gone. He needed you gone, Otis agreed. Or he needed you silent. Which brings us to the last and most sickening part of this. My stomach clenched. There's more. Otis didn't say anything. He just turned to the last section of the binder. It wasn't a financial report. It was a court filing. He slid it across the desk. I read the title, Application for Emergency Conservatorship of Nathaniel Price. I sank into the chair. I read the words. Suffering from advanced dementia. A danger to himself. Paranoid delusions. Incapable of managing his own affairs. This was Plan A, Otis said softly. They filed this last week. They were going to get a judge to declare you legally incompetent first. Greg, as your loving son-in-law and holder of the forged POA, would then have the legal right to sell your house, manage all your assets, and commit you. Commit me, I repeated. The word felt foreign. Sunset Vista. That was the name on the note, wasn't it? Otis said. They'd already picked out your room. I remembered last week, Greg and Monique at my table. Dad, we just need you to sign these last estate papers. I had refused. I had told them I would read them with my lawyer. I thought I was just being prudent. I was signing my own death warrant. Your refusal, Otis said, reading my mind. Your stubbornness. That's what triggered this. You scared them. You were too lucid. They realized Plan A wouldn't work in time, so they accelerated to Plan B. A forged sale. A desperate, sloppy attempt to get the money before the Monday audit, and they needed you out of the house, out of the way, before the real owners showed up. I looked at the signature on the affidavit. The sworn statement attesting to my paranoia and dementia. The signature was clear, beautiful, and precise. Monique Reed. They were going to lock me up, I said, the words catching in my throat. My own daughter. My little girl. She was going to have me committed. Yes, Otis said. He closed the binder. The sound was final. They were going to put you in a home, Nate. They were going to throw you in the trash so Greg could avoid prison. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city I owned. It was never about the money, Nate. It was about his survival. And Monique, she was the one who handed him the knife. I stared at the black binder. It had her name on it. Monique Reed. I shook my head. The word no formed in my throat, but it wouldn't come out. I could believe it of Greg. Greg was a stranger, an outsider, a greedy, arrogant fool I'd never trusted. I could see him forging my name. I could see him stealing from the company. That was business. That was just crime. But this was blood. No. I finally managed to say, my voice a dry rasp. Not Monique. You're wrong, Otis. I stood up from the desk and walked back to the vast window, turning my back on him. I couldn't look at that binder. Greg did this. Greg forced her. He's a manipulator. He must have threatened her. She's scared, Otis. That's my little girl. She wouldn't. She couldn't. I thought of her. Not the 38-year-old woman in designer clothes, but the 5-year-old girl with pigtails crying because she fell off her bike. I thought of the teenager I'd held when her first boyfriend broke her heart. I thought of the young woman who wept at Cynthia's funeral, her hand clinging to mine. She loved her mother, I whispered to the glass. She loved Cynthia. She wouldn't do this. She wouldn't sell her mother's house. She wouldn't plot to put her own father in the trash. I turned back to Otis, my heart pleading with him to agree with me, to tell me there was a mistake. She's weak, Otis. Greg is strong. He's a white man with a big corporate title. He probably convinced her this was all legal, that it was for my own good. Otis just looked at me. He didn't flinch. His eyes were full of a terrible, sad pity, but not for her. For me. Nate, he said, his voice quiet but firm. Sit down. I didn't move. Sit down, Nate. He repeated, his voice hardening. This is the part you're not going to want to see. This is the part that will break you. But you have to see it. I slowly walked back and sat in the chair, my legs feeling like lead. Greg didn't force her, Nate. Otis said, his voice softening just a fraction. Greg isn't the one who forged your signature. He wouldn't know how. He doesn't have your old files. He doesn't have your old letters. He doesn't have access to your personal life. He paused, letting the implication hang in the air. She didn't just hand him the knife, Nate. He opened the binder to a new section, and my blood turned to ice. She was the one who sharpened it. She was the one who showed him where to cut. And in some ways, Nate, this was all her idea. Otis didn't say, I told you so. He didn't argue. He's a lawyer. He deals in facts. He simply reached into the black binder, the one with my daughter's name on it, and pulled out an 8x10 high-gloss photograph. He didn't toss it. He slid it across the glass desk, a silent accusation. What is this? I asked, though I knew. That, Otis said, his voice flat, was taken last Tuesday night, at 9 p.m., roughly 3 hours after they left the courthouse. 3 hours, Nate, after they filed the legal petition to have you declared mentally incompetent. I picked up the photo. My hands were steady, but the image blurred. It was Greg and Monique. They were at Marcel's, that obscenely expensive French steakhouse downtown. The one Greg always bragged about, the one he said was out of my league. They weren't looking at the camera. They were looking at each other. Greg was holding a champagne flute high, his mouth open in a wide, triumphant grin. But it was Monique's face that held my gaze. She was laughing. Her head was thrown back, her eyes sparkling, a look of pure, unrestrained joy, a look I hadn't seen on her face in years. They were toasting. They're celebrating, I whispered. My stomach turned. They're celebrating. What? That they'd finally done it. It seems so, Otis said. They're toasting your removal, Nate. Your erasure. I dropped the photo as if it were on fire. This doesn't prove anything, Otis. It shows Greg is celebrating. He's a bully. He won. He probably told her they were celebrating a big deal at work. My Monique, she's just going along. She's impressionable. You said it yourself. She's what Nate... Otis cut me off, his voice sharp but not unkind. Weak, naive, scared. Look at that picture again. Does that look like a woman who is scared? Or does that look like a woman who just got exactly what she wanted? I couldn't look at it. I turned away, back to the window, back to the city lights. I can't. I won't believe it. Not of her. He did this. He poisoned her against me. She's my daughter, Otis. My little girl. She's a 38-year-old woman, Nate, Otis said, his voice hardening. And you're right. A photograph is just a moment. It's subjective. You need to hear it for yourself. I turned around. He was holding a small black digital voice recorder. My private investigator isn't cheap, Otis said. He's good. Greg's new BMW, the one he bought with misappropriated company funds, has been wired for sound for the last 2 weeks. My breath hitched. Otis, it's legal when the company, the one he's stealing from, authorizes the surveillance to protect its assets, Otis finished. He's been sloppy. He feels invincible. And when he feels invincible, he talks. Otis, I don't know if I can. You have to, Otis said. He wasn't asking. You have to know who you are fighting, Nate. You have to stop protecting the ghost of the little girl with pigtails and see the woman who is trying to destroy you." He pressed the play button. There was a muffled sound, the expensive hum of a luxury car engine, the faint sound of jazz from the radio. Then Greg's voice, smug and self-satisfied. "Greg, well, that was easier than I thought. The clerk at the courthouse barely even looked at the affidavit. Your signature really sold it, baby. A concerned daughter. Pure genius." My hand gripped the back of the chair. Then her voice. It was her voice, my Monique's voice, but it was different. It was sharp, cold, and high with a giddy, terrible energy. "Monique, please, it's done. Now we just have to wait for the judge to sign off. How long until the money from the house sale clears? I'm sick of waiting, Greg. Greg, soon. As soon as the old man is legally invisible. Once he's checked into Sunset Vista, the loan closes. The audit on Monday gets plugged. And we are $5 million richer. Monique. 5 million. God. Greg, I am so sick of pretending. I am so sick of it. I sank into the chair. My body went weak. Sick of pretending. Pretending what the Sunday dinners, the "I love you, Dad" texts she sent me just last week, the concern she feigned when I had the flu last winter bringing me soup. That, all of it. A performance, Greg. He laughed. A deep, ugly sound. You're a hell of an actress, I'll give you that. Oh, Dad, you look tired. Oh, Dad, let me fix you a plate. You had me fooled for a while there, Monique. Ugh, don't remind me. I can't stand the smell of that old house. It smells like him. Like old clothes and failure. I've been pretending to care for 5 years, Greg. 5 years of listening to his boring, pointless stories about the mail route. Oh, I knew this person I delivered that package. Who cares? No, I whispered. No. I had told her those stories because she asked. I thought she was interested in my life. In me. Otis didn't stop the recording. He just watched me. He made me listen. Monique. The man is an embarrassment, Greg. A total embarrassment. Do you have any idea what it's like? When my new friends, when your colleagues ask what my father does, I have to lie. I have to say, oh, he's in logistics, retired. I can't say the truth. I can't say, oh, he's a retired mailman who lives in a dump in the 04W. My father is a joke. There was a pause. I could hear her take a breath, and then the words that stopped my heart. Monique. He's a walking piece of trash, and I am so glad we are finally taking it out. Trash. The same word from the note. It wasn't Greg's word. It wasn't his cruelty. It was hers. It had always been hers. Otis hit the stop button. The silence that rushed into the presidential suite was heavier and more suffocating than any sound. The man I was 30 seconds ago, the father protecting the memory of his little girl, was gone. He was dead. She had killed him with those words. It wasn't Greg's plan. It was hers. Greg needed the money. He was a common thief desperate to cover his tracks. But Monique wanted the money, yes. But she also wanted something else. She wanted me gone. She wanted to erase the embarrassment. She wanted to silence the man who reminded her of a life she was desperate to forget. She wasn't coerced. She wasn't manipulated. She was the engine. I stood up. The man who sat down was a father in denial. The man who stood up was a chairman of the board. Otis. Said. It was different. The warmth was gone. The denial was gone. All that was left was a cold, quiet precision. The Cynthia Protocol, you said it was designed to protect the company from my family. Yes, Otis said, watching me. Does it apply to her? Otis's face was grim. It applies to any family member engaged in willful, demonstrable action to defraud you, your assets, or the company. Yes, Nate, it applies to Monique. Fully. Good, I said. I walked back to the desk. I looked at the binder no longer with fear, but with purpose. Now, tell me the rest. Tell me everything she's done. I want to know about the lover. My denial shattered. The image of my laughing, triumphant daughter toasting my demise, the sound of her voice calling me trash, had killed the father in me. The man left standing in that hotel suite was someone else, someone colder, someone who hadn't been seen in 20 years, the chairman. Otis, I said. My voice was different. The warmth was gone. The denial was gone. All that was left was a cold, quiet precision. The Cynthia Protocol. You said it was designed to protect the company from my family. Yes, Otis said, watching me, his eyes gauging my reaction. Does it apply to her? Otis's face was grim. It applies to any family member engaged in willful, demonstrable action to defraud you, your assets, or the company. Yes, Nate, it applies to Monique, fully. Good, I said. I walked back to the desk. I looked at the binder no longer with fear, but with purpose. Now, tell me the rest. Tell me everything she's done. Otis looked down at his file. He seemed to hesitate as if he knew this next part was a different kind of poison. Nate, he said slowly, you're looking at this as a betrayal of you. You're still seeing yourself as the center of their world. You're not. You're just a resource. Greg is a resource. To Monique, everyone is a resource. I frowned. What are you talking about? She's with him. They're a team. I heard the recording. They're in this together. Are they? Otis asked. Greg thinks they are. Greg thinks he's the mastermind, the star VP who found a clever way out of a jam. He thinks Monique is just the greedy wife egging him on, happy to spend the money. He's wrong, Nate. Greg isn't the player. He is the one being played. Played by who? Otis didn't answer. He simply reached into the binder and pulled out another 8x10 photograph. It wasn't a grainy surveillance shot from a dark car. This one was clear, taken in the bright daylight of a restaurant patio. I picked it up. It was Monique. She was sitting at a small table, clinking a wine glass. She was smiling, that same giddy, triumphant smile from the other photo. But the man she was toasting was not Greg. Who is this? I asked, though I felt a sickening wave of recognition. The man was younger than me, older than Greg, sharp suit, expensive watch. His name, Otis said, is Chad Peterson. He's a commercial real estate developer. He's also Greg's primary partner in both the Arizona and Texas warehouse acquisitions. I looked closer at the photo. They weren't just clinking glasses. Their knees were touching under the small table. He was leaning in, his eyes locked on her. It was intimate. It was predatory. Otis slid another photo across the desk. This one was from a different angle, clearly taken by the PI. Monique and Chad, in the opulent lobby of the St. Regis Hotel in Buckhead. She was at the check-in desk. He was standing just behind her, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back. The date stamp on the bottom of the photo was small, white, and clear. It was from 3 days ago, the day after she and Greg had filed the petition to have me committed. She's betraying him too, I whispered. It wasn't a question. The emptiness in my chest deepened, becoming a void. The little girl I had tried to protect was not just gone. She had never existed. Why? I asked, my voice hollow. Why him? Greg has the title, he has the salary, he's her husband. Because Greg is just a vice president, Nate, Otis explained, his voice like a surgeon's scalpel. Greg is an employee. Chad owns the development company. Greg is the middleman. Chad is the source. Monique always climbs the ladder. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog. So she's leaving Greg. She's leaving him for a richer man. Is that the story? No, Nate. Otis said, his voice dropping. You're still not getting it. This is not a simple affair. This is a coup. She's not leaving Greg for Chad. She's using Chad to destroy Greg, and then she's going to destroy Chad too. She's not climbing the ladder, Nate. She's planning to burn the whole damn building down after she steals the fire truck. Otis pulled out the final item from the binder. It wasn't a photo. It was another digital recorder. The PI didn't just bug Greg's car, Nate. After we saw these photos, we put a bug in her car too. We thought we were tracking Greg's conspiracy. We stumbled onto hers. He pressed play. There was the sound of a car door closing, the beep of a seatbelt. Then Monique's voice, not giddy this time, but cold and sharp. Monique. He's so stupid, Chad. He's just so predictable. He really thinks this is about us moving up. He thinks I'm impressed by his little $5 million scam. A man's voice, smooth and confident. Chad. Chad, he chuckled. He's a useful idiot, baby. That's what he is. But are you sure you have the copies? The real copies. Monique. I have everything. I've been downloading his personal files from his laptop for 6 months. Every fake invoice Greg created, every single wire transfer to his shell company. I also Have the original contracts you signed for the real price of the warehouses. The $10 million ones. The ones you're hiding from the IRS. The confidence in Chad's voice vanished. Chad. Now, honey, that's our insurance policy. Monique. No, it's my insurance policy. You don't get it, do you? Greg thinks I'm helping him beat the audit on Monday. He thinks I'm his loyal wife, helping him forge his own father's name. He thinks I'm going to delete the files for him once the house money comes through. But I've copied everything to an encrypted drive. I have his fraud. And Chad, I have your tax evasion. I stopped breathing. Otis just watched me. Do you see it now, Nate? Otis asked, pausing the recording. I couldn't speak. I just nodded. She's helping him. I finally managed to say, piecing the fragments together. She's encouraging him to commit the fraud. She pushed him to forge my name. She needed him to steal the money from my house. Exactly, Otis confirmed. She needs him to consolidate all the stolen cash. Greg thinks they're going to use that money, the $3 million from your house and whatever else he can siphon, to start fresh after the audit blows over. He thinks they're a team Bonnie and Clyde. But she has copies. I said, the monstrosity of the plan dawning on me. She has copies of his fraud, and she has copies of Chad's tax evasion. She's not his partner, she's his executioner. Otis nodded, his face grim. Her endgame is simple. She lets Greg get the $3 million from your house. She lets him plug the hole in the books and pass the audit on Monday. He's safe. He's happy. He thinks he's won. He thinks he's the smartest man in Atlanta. Then, I finished the words like ice. On Tuesday, she strikes. She blackmails them both, Otis said. At the same time, she goes to Greg and says, give me everything you stole from Pinnacle or this drive goes to the SEC. And then she goes to Chad and says, give me everything you skimmed from the warehouse deals or this drive goes to the IRS. She'll destroy them both. She'll take the money from your house, the money Greg stole, and the money she blackmails from them, put it all in an offshore account and disappear. And me, I asked. My voice was barely a whisper. What about me? Otis looked at me, his eyes full of the pity I had refused to see earlier. You, Nate, you're just the seed money. You're the casualty she was willing to sacrifice to start the war. You locked away in Sunset Vista, legally incompetent, forgotten by the world. You're just the collateral damage. You're the trash she was taking out to clear the field for her real game. I sat there for a full minute in the most expensive hotel room in the city, surrounded by a luxury I had secretly built. And I had never ever in my 71 years felt so utterly and completely poor. The recording stopped. The silence that filled the presidential suite was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb. I sat there motionless, staring at the black digital recorder on the glass desk. I was 71 years old. I had lived through the struggle for civil rights. I had buried my parents. I had held my wife's hand as she took her last breath. I thought I understood loss. I thought I knew what pain was. I was wrong. What I felt in that moment was something new. It was a hollowing out. It was the sound of the last door in my heart slamming shut, the lock turning, the key breaking off. The little girl who fell off her bike, the teenager who cried over a broken heart, the daughter I walked down the aisle. They were all ghosts. They had died and I hadn't even known. The woman who had taken their place, the woman on that recording, was a stranger, a cold, calculating stranger who had looked at my life, my love, my entire 40-year sacrifice, and had marked it down for demolition. Collateral damage. Trash. I didn't cry. The tears wouldn't come. The pain was too deep for tears. It was a cold physical weight in my chest. I felt the last shred of my paternal love, the stubborn, foolish hope that she was just misguided, wither and die. And then it was gone. All of it. The sadness, the confusion, the denial. It all burned away, leaving behind something hard, something clean, something cold as steel. I slowly stood up. My back, which had been stooped with the imaginary weight of the old mailman for years, straightened. I felt the stiffness in my knees vanish. I was no longer a father in mourning. I was the chairman of the board. And my company was being robbed. I looked at Otis. He was watching me, his face a mask of professional concern, waiting. Otis, I said. My voice was different. The soft grandfatherly rasp was gone. It was replaced by the voice I used to use in boardrooms, the voice that didn't ask, it told. The voice that cut through excuses and got to the point. You said phase 1 is complete. The discretionary account is frozen. Yes, Nate, Otis confirmed. Good, I said. Now phase 2, the house. I don't want the sale just dead. I want it undone. I want that forged power of attorney flagged in every system from here to Delaware. I want Greg Reed's name to be a red light that stops every banker in this city. It's already in motion, Otis said. The bank's legal department will have it by 9 a.m. Not just the bank, I said. I want the DA's office. This isn't a civil matter anymore. This is criminal fraud. I want a file opened. Otis nodded, a grim flicker of approval in his eyes. Consider it done. And phase 3, I said, walking toward the glass desk. The Monday meeting, the audit. I've drafted the emergency notice for the board, Otis said. It goes out tomorrow. Good. 10 a.m. sharp, in the main boardroom. I want Alistair there. I want the entire executive committee. I want our chief auditor, and I want him. Greg will be there, Nate. He has to be. It's his audit. He'll be there, I said. But he won't be expecting me. I paused, then looked at my old friend. And Otis. Yes, Nate. Call the police, not the local precinct. Call your contact at the State Financial Crimes Unit. I want them waiting. I want them discreet. I want them in the lobby of the Pinnacle building at 10:15 a.m. on Monday. Otis raised an eyebrow. You want him arrested at the office in front of everyone? I thought of Monique's note. I thought of her voice. An embarrassment. Trash. No, I said. I don't want him arrested in front of everyone. I want him arrested in front of me. The first sign that the world was tilting was at 8:05 a.m. on Monday morning. Greg, already dressed in his best Master of the Universe suit for the audit, tried to buy Monique a latte from the small cafe in their lobby. The card was declined. Insufficient funds, the barista said, looking embarrassed for him. That's impossible, Greg snapped. Run it again. Declined, sir, the barista repeated, holding the card out. Monique rolled her eyes. Use mine, Greg, honestly. She handed over her own platinum card. Declined. What is going on? Monique hissed as they walked away coffeeless. Greg, did you do something stupid? It's just a bank error, Greg said, but his fingers were already dialing his private banker, his face pale. He was on hold for less than 10 seconds before the banker picked up, his voice stiff and formal. Mr. Reed, yes, a flag has been placed on your accounts pending an internal review. A flag. Remove it. I have business to conduct, Greg demanded. I'm afraid I can't do that, sir, the banker said. And there is another matter. The $3 million loan you applied for against the property at 1420 Oak Street. It has been denied. Greg stopped walking. Denied on what grounds? The paperwork is solid. The power of attorney document you provided has been declared fraudulent and void by the owner's legal counsel. The banker said, his voice like ice. The county clerk's office has been notified. I'm afraid I cannot discuss this any further. The line clicked dead. Fraudulent. Monique grabbed his arm. How could he know? He doesn't... Greg snarled, his mind racing. It must be a clerical error. That old fool wouldn't know a POA from a postcard. We have to go to the house. We have to find him. We'll make him sign it again. They didn't wait. They ran to the leased BMW and sped through Atlanta traffic, breaking every speed limit. They burst out of the car and ran up the lawn past the sold sign Greg had planted so proudly. Greg slammed his shoulder into the front door, breaking the simple lock. Nate, Dad! Monique yelled into the silent house. The house was empty. The kitchen was clean. Cynthia's armchair was still in its place. It was as if he had simply vanished. He's not here, Greg yelled, kicking a kitchen chair. Where is he? Where could that useless old man go? Greg, Monique said, her voice quiet. She was staring at the front door. Look. He turned. He saw the note taped to the inside of the door, the note they hadn't seen when they burst in. Just 2 words written in thick black marker. Check Monday. What the hell does that mean? Greg said, ripping it from the door. Check what Monday? The audit. At that exact moment, both of their phones buzzed simultaneously with a new email. The sound in the silent house was deafening. Greg looked at his. The subject line made his blood run cold. Emergency board meeting, 10:00 a.m., attendance mandatory. Monique looked at hers. Her heart leaped. From the law offices of Otis King, re the estate of Nathaniel Price. Your presence is required at Pinnacle Logistics Headquarters 40th floor at 10:00 a.m. to discuss your father's will. They stared at each other, processing two completely different sets of information. Greg's mind was racing. The audit. They must have found the discrepancy. They're calling an emergency meeting. It's fine. I can handle this. I'll just reroute the funds from the Arizona account. I'll tell them it's a server error. He was convinced he could lie his way out. Monique's mind was also racing. His will, Otis King? That's his lawyer. Oh my God, Greg, the estate of Nathaniel Price. That means he's dead. The old man must have had a heart attack when he saw the note. He's dead. We're inheriting, we're rich. She was convinced she had won. Let's go, Greg said, grabbing his keys. We have to get to the office. Yes, Monique said, a small triumphant smile playing on her lips. We have to. They ran out of the house. Two partners in crime, two traitors, each one running toward their own separate and equally wrong conclusion. They were both about to walk completely blind straight into the executioner's blade. The elevator doors opened onto the 40th floor with a silent, expensive hiss. The air up here was different. It was cold still and smelled faintly of leather and glass cleaner. The carpet was so thick it seemed to swallow the sound of their footsteps as they walked the long corridor to the main boardroom. Greg Reed adjusted his silk tie. He felt a small bead of sweat on his neck, but he brushed it away. This was it. The audit. They must have found the discrepancy early. That Check Monday note, the old fool must have called Alistair in a panic, babbling about his house. Amateurs. Greg was annoyed but not scared. He was a senior vice president. He was the star. He could talk his way out of anything. He would blame the accounting software, a server migration, anything. Monique walked beside him, her face a perfect mask of somber concern. She was dressed in an elegant conservative black sheath dress. She was playing the part of the grieving daughter. She had seen her father's lawyer, Otis King, on the email invitation. The estate of Nathaniel Price. It was happening. The old man was gone, the inheritance was hers. She was confused why the entire board was involved, but she assumed it was a formality. Perhaps her father in his pathetic mailman retirement had some small forgotten stock options. She was here to collect. The massive double doors of the boardroom were open. They stepped inside. The room was silent. The long polished obsidian table stretched out like a dark mirror reflecting the panoramic view of the Atlanta skyline. At the far end, looking small against the wall of glass, sat Alistair, the CEO. His hands were folded. He wasn't smiling. To his right sat Otis King, Nate's lawyer, his face carved from granite. To Alistair's left sat the CFO, the COO, and the two senior partners from the external auditing firm. They were all looking at the door. They were all waiting for them. Alistair, gentlemen, Greg said, striding forward, his voice booming with a confidence he didn't quite feel. This is a surprise. My audit wasn't scheduled until 2 p.m. You could have just called. What's the emergency? Monique glided in behind him. She focused on Otis. Mr. King, she said, her voice soft and trembling just enough. Thank you for handling this so quickly. I know this is difficult for everyone. Alistair and Otis exchanged a single brief glance. It was a look that would haunt Greg later. Otis King did not stand. He simply motioned to the two empty chairs at the opposite end of the table. Sit down, Mr. Reed. Mrs. Reed. Greg felt the first real prickle of fear. The way Otis said Mrs. Reed. It wasn't sympathetic. It was cold. Monique felt it too. This didn't feel like the reading of a will. It felt like an interrogation. We are not here to discuss your audit, Gregory, Alistair said, his voice flat, devoid of its usual energy. And we are not here to discuss an estate, Monique, Otis added, his voice like gravel. We are here, Alistair said, because we are waiting for the chairman. Greg frowned. The chairman? I thought he was in Zurich. He never attends these things. He is attending this one, Otis said. He has called this meeting to address a situation. Right then, the main boardroom doors, which they thought were already open, opened wider. A second private door they had never even noticed, the one that led directly from the chairman's private elevator, hissed open. And Nate walked in. He walked in. He didn't look like the man who had sat at my kitchen table eating my brisket and patting me on the back. He wasn't the retired mailman. The old worn windbreaker was gone. The faded trousers were gone. The posture slightly stooped with age and humility was gone. The man who walked in through that private elevator door was 6'2", straight-backed, and wore a dark navy Tom Ford suit that probably cost more than Greg's car. It wasn't a costume. It fit him like a second skin. He walked with a slow, measured stillness, a deep, quiet authority that didn't need to announce itself. He was not Nate. He was Nathaniel Price. Greg Reed saw him first, and his brain so sharp and quick simply refused to compute the image. He blinked. He actually squinted as if trying to clear his vision. "Nate!" Greg's voice was too loud in the silent room. He laughed, a short, nervous barking sound. "Nate, what on earth are you doing here? Did you get lost?" He looked around at the silent board members looking for an ally, for someone else who saw the absurdity. "The mailroom is on the first floor. Old man. This is the 40th. This is the executive boardroom." He turned to Alistair, the CEO, his tone shifting to one of annoyance. "Alistair, seriously, can someone get security? My father-in-law is..." He's clearly confused. He's been having episodes. This is exactly what I was telling you about Monique. Monique, who had been staring at her father as if he were a ghost, was pale. She didn't say anything. Alistair, the CEO, did not smile. He didn't even look at Greg. He stood up. He did it slowly, respectfully. Otis King stood up. The CFO and the COO stood up. The two auditors from the external firm stood up. Every single person in that room stood up. Not for Greg. They stood up in unison as I, Nathaniel Price, walked to the head of the table. Greg's smile froze. It didn't fade. It froze, stuck on his face in a horrible, confused grimace. "Alistair," he stammered. What is this?" Alistair looked at Greg, and his eyes were not angry. They were filled with a cold, profound disappointment that was so much worse. "Gregory," Alistair said, his voice flat, "this is not Nate. You will address him correctly." Address who?" Greg's voice was getting high. "What are you talking about? That's Nate Price, my wife's father. He's a retired..." Otis King spoke. His voice, unlike my quiet one, was a deep baritone that filled every corner of the room. It was the voice of a man who breaks other men for a living. "Mr. Reed," Otis said, his words sharp and perfectly enunciated. "This is Mr. Nathaniel Price, the founder, the chairman of the board, and the majority shareholder of Pinnacle Logistics." The words hit Greg Reed like a physical blow. He actually staggered back a step, one hand flailing, grabbing the back of his chair to steady himself. "What?" It was a whisper. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time. He saw the suit. He saw the cold, intelligent eyes staring back at him. He saw the man who wasn't a mailman, but a king. He saw the man who signed his paychecks. "No," Greg whispered. His face was white, the color draining from it like water down a drain. "No, that's not possible. You're a mailman. You're nothing." "I was a mailman," I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the silence. "It was an honest job. You should try it sometime. And you, Greg, are a vice president. Or rather," I paused, "you were. You..." Greg's mind was short-circuiting. I could see the connections being made. The audit, the emergency meeting, the failed loan from the bank, the frozen accounts, the note, check Monday. He looked at Monique. Her face was a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. She wasn't seeing an inheritance. She was seeing the end of her entire life. This is a joke," Greg said, trying to laugh again, but it came out as a desperate, strangling sound. "A setup." "Nate, what did you do? What did you tell them?" I didn't answer him. I looked at the chief auditor. "Let's begin." The woman opened her file. "Mr. Reed, we show an initial discrepancy of $5,200,000 in the Texas and Arizona acquisition accounts routed through a shell corporation, Reed Holdings LLC, an entity registered in your name." "I can explain that," Greg said, his voice high and thin, cracking. That's a clerical error, a server migration. The paperwork. It's..." "Save it," I said, cutting him off. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. I took one step toward him. "I'm not Alistair. I'm not the board. I'm the man whose house you forged a signature to sell. I'm the man you tried to throw in the trash." I looked at the gold watch on my wrist, the one Cynthia had given me. It wasn't the expensive one Greg always wore. It was a simple old Omega, but it kept perfect time. "It is 10:04 a.m., I said. "You don't have an hour to lie your way through an audit, Greg. You have 30 seconds. 30 seconds to explain to me, your chairman, why you have been stealing from my company." 30 seconds to explain the $5 million hole. And you had better be convincing. I leaned in, my voice dropping to a whisper that only he and Monique could hear. Because in exactly 2 minutes, 2 officers from the State Financial Crimes Unit are walking into this room to arrest you for criminal wire fraud. Panic. It was indeed gradual. It was instant. Pure animal panic. Greg's eyes darted around the room. He saw the auditors' stony faces. He saw Alistair's disgust. He saw Otis, his arms crossed, a silent sentinel. He saw me. He had no way out. The walls were glass, but they were closing in. He did what all cowards do. He did what all rats in a trap do. He turned on the only other rat in the trap with him. He pointed a shaking, accusing finger at his wife. At my daughter. Her. He screamed the word. It echoed off the glass skyline. It was her, Monique. She made me do it. Monique's head snapped up her face, a mask of disbelief and pure venomous rage. What? She's the one. She's obsessed with money. She's the one who's embarrassed by you. She pushed me. She said I wasn't man enough, that we needed more. She found the loopholes. She told me how to do it. I did it for her. It was all for her. Her! Greg's scream echoed against the glass. She's the one. It was all her. Monique leaped to her feet, her face a mask of pure venomous rage. You lying, pathetic coward, you're blaming me. You're the one who forged his name, Greg shrieked, pointing at me. You're the one who told me he was a simpleton. Silence. Otis's voice boomed through the room, cutting off their panicked accusations. He picked up a remote. You're both fools, he said, his voice dripping with contempt. You were so busy robbing the company and you... He looked at Greg. Were so busy robbing your father-in-law you never stopped to look at the person robbing you. He aimed the remote at the massive presentation screen behind me. It lit up. It wasn't a spreadsheet, it was a photograph. Monique. At that same restaurant patio, laughing, clinking a wine glass with the man I now knew was Chad Peterson, Greg's partner. Then another photo, the St. Regis Hotel lobby. Chad's hand on her back. Greg stared at the screen. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked at Monique, then at the screen, then back at Monique. The realization hit him, the understanding that he wasn't the player. He was the pawn. While you, Otis said, his voice cold, were busy planning to frame her father, she was busy gathering evidence to blackmail you and your partner. She was playing you both. No, Greg whispered. He looked utterly broken. Yes, I said, stepping forward. She was. You're fired, Greg. And Alistair, I expect your full cooperation with the federal investigation. Of course, Mr. Chairman, Alistair said, his face grim. As for you, I said to Greg, you were worried about the audit. You should have been worried about the police. I nodded to Otis. Otis picked up his phone. Send them in. The main boardroom doors opened. 2 uniformed officers and a man in a detective's suit walked in. Gregory Reed, the detective asked. Greg just nodded, his body slack. You are under arrest for conspiracy, wire fraud, and forgery. As they pulled his arms behind his back, as the click of the handcuffs echoed in the room, Monique finally completely fell apart. She sank to the floor, her expensive black dress puddling around her, her hands grasping. Dad, she sobbed, actually crawling a few inches toward me. Dad, please, don't let them. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean it. Please, Dad. I'm your daughter. I'm your little girl. I looked down at her. The coldness in my chest was absolute. I felt nothing, no pity, no anger, just an ending. I looked at her, then at Greg being led away in handcuffs. You said my place was in the trash. I said, my voice quiet but clear enough for everyone to hear. But it seems you two have already taken yourselves out. I turned my back on her. I walked toward my private elevator, leaving them both in the ruins of the life they had tried to steal. The elevator doors opened to the silence of my suite. Hours had passed. The adrenaline was gone, leaving only a quiet, heavy calm. My phone, the simple one I always carried, was vibrating on the glass desk. It was a frantic, desperate buzz that wouldn't stop. I walked over and looked at the screen. It glowed with 2 lines, 67 missed calls. Monique. I watched it buzz one more time. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel pity. I felt finished. My hand reached out and pressed the button on the side. The screen went dark. The buzzing stopped. I silenced her. I picked up the small faded photograph of Cynthia from the desk. I looked at her laughing in the sun. I kept my promise, Cynthia, I whispered to her image. I protected our legacy. They mistook our quiet life for weakness. They were wrong. I picked up my coffee cup. It was cold now, but I didn't mind. I took a sip, staring out at the Atlanta skyline at the lights of my city. It was over. Justice was served. I finally felt at peace. Here is the lesson we can learn from this story. This story is a powerful lesson that true wealth is not measured by the car you drive or the house you live in, but by your integrity, character, and the quiet dignity you carry. It teaches us that greed and betrayal are blinding, causing people to underestimate those they should respect the most. The quietest person in the room is often the most powerful. While money can be stolen, respect is earned, and true family is built on loyalty, not on what can be taken. In the end, underestimating someone based on a humble appearance can be the most expensive mistake you ever make. Did you like my story, and what city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next story.